A few days ago, I made a video talking about the new government policy in British Columbia that capped rent increases to a mere 2%. And as you can imagine, based on the comments that I got, there seemed to be a lot of confusion as to why this was a bad thing. And it is, or at least it will be, a bad thing, especially for renters. Now, I'm going to show some of the comments that I got in that video in this video, but before I do that, I want to thank everyone who participated in the conversation online in my comment section. I don't get a chance to reply to every comment, but I definitely read every comment that's posted. Understanding the effects of policies like this is critically important because there is a lot at stake. Out there are a lot of financially struggling people that are going to get hurt in the process of enacting bad policy. This is the case of politicians giving people what they're asking for, but not necessarily giving them what they need. And this may surprise you, but the big greedy landlords, they actually might have the most to benefit from a policy like this that's seemingly put into place to protect the tenant. How could that be? Well, we'll get to that. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you already know that I'm a big fan of context. After all, context is key. So let's lay out some context while reviewing this policy. In some of my videos earlier in the year, we talked about this concept of supply and demand and some of the factors that were influencing Canadian housing prices. And I even predicted back then that when interest rates started to rise, that rents were likely to jump up dramatically and follow suit. It isn't shocking that I was right. If you watch those videos, it was purely logical, because the whole underlying problems of this whole housing market comes down to two main things. Number one, very bad fiscal and monetary policy over the last few years that's contributed to much more inflation than we needed to experience. There's a reason we're the worst performing country in the G8. And number two, a significant shortage of housing. And that undersupply of housing is only getting worse. We went from a whole lot of buyers chasing a limited number of homes and converted our problem into a whole lot of renters chasing a limited number of rentals, of which a substantial number of those renters are just waiting to see what happens with the market before buying. And there is an interesting point to keep in mind, because in this economic environment, what you have is two very different groups of renters. You've got the long-term renters who have been renting for quite some time and will continue to rent for quite some time, and likely not by choice, it's because they're not as affluent. And then you've got an influx of wealthier short-term renters who have likely higher paying jobs, better credit, and even money in the bank. And those renters are choosing to wait while the market calms down, looking for their opportunity to buy, or because of the Bank of Canada and an antiquated stress test are currently priced out of purchasing a home. Put yourself in the landlord's shoes for a second. Which of the two tenants are you going to pick? The tenant that's going to be around for a while, can't really handle rent increases, and because of this new rent policy, you'll have limited ways to raise rents to cover costs. Or you're going to choose the wealthier tenant that's only planning on being around for a while until they buy their new home, and once they move out because of this new policy, you're going to have an easier way of raising rents. This is a no-brainer for anyone in that situation. In response to my video, KrillXK replied, "Tell me you don't want people to have access to affordable housing without telling me you don't want people to have access to affordable housing." Actually, I do want affordable housing. That's the whole point of videos like this, so that we can become informed enough so that we can vote out politicians doing a shit job, or encourage them to enact policies that are actually going to work. But if you think that this rent cap is going to achieve our common goal of having more affordable housing, then there are three major problems with that. The first is that landlords typically want to avoid vacancies, or at the very least, keep vacancies low. It's one of the most important costs that landlords look at when owning real estate assets. And in doing that, some landlords may even opt to keep rents below what market rents would otherwise be in order to hang on to a good tenant. The sad part is that now, more than ever, landlords are going to be incentivized to find ways of getting rid of their tenants so that they can legally raise rents higher. And let's be honest, there are some scummy landlords out there. So now middle income and low income families don't just have to possibly contend with rising rents, but they may also have to contend with crafty landlords financially motivated to find a way to remove them from the property so that they can bring in higher paying tenants. And no, landlords are not going to be happy to do this. Most would just prefer to keep the tenants that they already have and just be able to increase rents according to market conditions. The second problem with this policy, which once again hurts affordability, not solves it, is that any new rentals that hit the market are going to be encouraged to charge premium rates right out of the gate. With policies like this, you make it a measure twice, cut once type of situation for landlords. It's much better in this case for landlords to drive rents up as high as they possibly can go, because once they have a tenant in there, if they're wanting to keep that tenant to avoid vacancies, they're going to have a hard time adjusting rents to handle increasing costs. Which brings us to our third problem. Over the last few years, bringing new housing inventory to market has become more and more expensive, and investors are finding less financial reason to bring new rental housing to market. Because all policies like this do is bring more contention between landlords and tenants. After all, why go through all of that effort and put all of your capital at risk if the return on your investment can simply be capped? Remove or reduce the incentive to build more rentals because of things like rental control, and less rentals get built. That's historically proven. Then what happens in the long term when supply shrinks even more? That's right, even higher rents. Trevor and Sean also commented on my video, and Trevor said, people owning 200 plus homes and renting them all for mortgage plus 20% is what hurts lower middle class people. And Sean said, dude, rent has gone up crazy due to greedy landlords. Really? That's the reason why rents went up? I mean, we can agree that some landlords are greedy. By extension, we could probably say that some tenants are also greedy. Some people are just greedy. We could also agree that there are some people who own more than 200 plus homes here in Canada, but that's a small fraction of the population, and believe it or not, they're less affected by this policy. So is greedy landlords really the thing that's driving rents up? It's not our immigration policy that has chosen to bring in more people into Canada than we can house. It's not the political red tape or inflationary construction costs that create a barrier for meeting housing needs or significantly reduces the ability to create truly affordable housing. It's not our dependence on foreign oil and bad fiscal management on both a federal and a provincial level. Greedy landlords do exist, but their ability to be greedy in this economic environment is a symptom, not the cause. And unfortunately, it's these big greedy landlords that are likely going to be the ones that benefit most from these rent control policies. It's easy to think, especially if you don't already have the benefit of having experience in owning a home, that if your mortgage is locked in, that your costs really don't change much. But in reality, they do. Annual insurance premiums have seen a dramatic rise. Property taxes have seen significant hikes. You've got management costs, vacancies, repairs and maintenance costs at an all-time high. And of course, I assume you also want the caretaker of the property to get a living wage as well. Well, there's a cost to that. It's the small landlords, the mom and pop shops that are ultimately going to suffer most from these rent control policies. And you're already seeing some of these smaller players indicating that they're going to sell off their portfolio because they cannot cope with the rising costs. So you want to talk about greedy landlords? They're secretly loving this, because here you have tenants actively cheering on rent control policies that are squeezing the smaller guys. And who do you think is going to come in and buy these rental units when they get squeezed out? The big landlords often have a strong equity position that they can leverage to weather any storm anyway. And since they know the rental rules better than anyone, they'll scoop up any rentals that hit the market and use their knowledge to drive up rents faster than the small lenders ever could have. So if you're in favor of the 2% rent cap or any rent control policy in general, then at least you have that in common with the big greedy landlords.